Hey everyone! So, this year marks the 40th anniversary of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, and with a new cartoon coming from Nick and Paramount, I thought it would be interesting way to celebrate to look at the most infamous production of the show. While most people seem to be on board with that assessment, I was a little surprised that someone says a fifth incarnation, and really, this one, which lasted only one season from September 12th, 1997 to May 15th, 1998, which bears a 4.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb, well, you do, I suppose. I mean, of course, there were the usual licensing pushes of stuff like toys and books and food tie-ins. I believe there was an LCD game. At one point, there's even going to be a 3D game being developed by a pre-Grand Theft Auto 3D Made Designs, now known as Rockstar North, and but none of that came to fruition. So, and even though it was intended to kind of give the TV arm like a shot after the 1996 show, the 1987 show previously ended in 96, the opposite happened and sent the franchise into hiatus for half a decade, and now it's still seen as a low point where it's not even considered to be canon by many, including one of the co-creators. So, let's get into who it's mean and why I believe that the show's Mutation didn't work. Normally, I would dive right into my points about to illustrate this matter. However, before I do that, I thought I would briefly list the positives as I have with it, however few of them might be. I mean, the intro and outro theme aren't too bad in most versions. I mean, like the copy I was able to find in the show, which I actually watched all of it to make sure I have all the details correct. At where you have both a kind of a rock and roll theme song in the opening, as well as a kind of rap song in the outro, which is admittedly cheesy, granted. Not quite the 87 theme or even the ninja rap in the second movie, but I got sauce for one, I'll admit. And even the ones they did for the later release are actually kind of decent. Something like a Europop-esque with Fantastic Never Panic, so to speak. And seeing the shots of New York City in that time frame is really kind of wistful. Oh, oh, now looking back, never forget, so to speak. And anyway, let's get to it. While it would be fairly easy to pin and put the finger on the infamous Venus de Milo, as well as the fact the turtles are not biologically related in this incarnation, the more I think about it, the more that doesn't give things out due diligence. Don't get me wrong. Those are certainly symptoms of the show's problems, but not the cause. The more I thought about it during my rewatch, which is like the first time I've done it in ages, since the original airing in many cases, or never at all, is that Venus didn't really seem like a Mary Sue the more I think about it, but rather she's the only one written competently and for the most part consistently, he being like the fish out of water, so to speak, where she's not just new to their dynamic, but also to the mainland United States, having lived most of her life with her master somewhere in China. They don't get more specific than that at all, which is also extends to the other ones. Like, they distilled each one down to the most basic trait from most other incarnations. However, and how what if you had to pull with that time frame where you have Splinter being an eccentric, like old sensei, a Leonardo being like a stern leader, Michelangelo being a complete goofball, or you have Donatello being into machines, and Raph being like a deadpan hothead. So my favorite turtle was the closest to who they got. They even had the same voice actor who, top of voicing him in the third movie, was also the voice of the first Ed and Eddie. To a point where the show could almost make it one of its own fight with Ed and Eddie sound effects, added memes, which brings me to my next point. Admittedly, these aren't the worst practical turtles I've ever seen, since those weird sing-along videos exist, but it certainly is a far cry from the Jim Henson costumes from the first two movies. In fact, the pitch of the show actually began as a proposed fourth live-action film, which ultimately never got made, despite Playmates wanting to make merchandise for it. Or, and I mean, it was the first attempt at doing like a live-action and television adaptation for the show. Oh, but yeah, uh, as you can tell, there were some moments where, on top of the usual bit where the dialogue not always syncing up with what the animatronics are saying, in case of the turtles was the various rogues gallery. You have other ones where Michelangelo's eyes start moving other directions, kind of derping. I mean, and that also, but an even bigger miss, as has been pointed out by others, is the audio, where some sound effects are reasonable, like the rev and engine when they're revving up their vehicles, or like a heavy he he clawed whenever they hit someone they're fighting. Others just get kind of obnoxious after a while, and kind of really obnoxious. I mean, one of the most infamous ones, like there's like a lot of belching going on. Like, does do the people who do the ADR need some Beano or something? I also at some point it gets almost like you could imagine that the sound effects mixer is actually just Seuss Gravity Falls fiddling with his Casio. Only this is not really a show you want to go yeah for at all. Mm. One factor that did cite why I tapped out, even at a younger age, was the plot. I mean, there's something that inside my head that made me go. It was less like yay turtles and more. I'm 5 years old, and what is this? So at some point, I started scanning a TV guide, which this being in the late 90s was like an actual physical TV guide, magazine or newspaper or clipping, and to see what else was on, whether it was something like Batman or Superman or Men in Black. I mean, we were getting very close to Pokemon starting, of course. I mean, and I want to remember it's photographic, but on my rewatch, I did see the exact episodes that caused me just to who drop the show outright. Those being in the first clip show and the episode Windfall, where they're fighting over a winning lottery ticket. This is exactly why you just sign the back whenever in the off chance you do win the jackpots, how unlikely the odds may be. And it's not just in individual episodes. It's no matter whether I'm going with airing order, production order. I mean, the episode lists I found was going production order, whereas the actual way that they were being streamed was in airing order. or the continuity is definitely kind of all over the place, which is something that will become very apparent in my next point I'd like to address. Even factoring in and the fact the franchise was still relatively young at the time, it's still hopefully quite confusing about exactly where the show fit in, or even the marketing and the show still got confused about that one, where they were claiming it was like took place after the events of the A7 show. Oh, but many aspects, as well as by the several characters conspicuous by their absence, including key allies such as April or Casey, which I'll come back to in one moment. And I mean, on the other, there were kind of thin threads that connected them to the live action movie trilogy they had just wrapped up as well. Oh, the fact that Shredder is initially back after somehow surviving like the trash compactor and the dock crushing. The fact that he has scars on his face and that Splinter has like a clipped ear implies that there's a continuity where her, Splinter was Yoshi's pet, and after Saki murdered him, and also the fact that the lair is the abandoned subway away from the second and third movies, which is actually another aspect I kind of like. In fact, mainly because it's the exact same set, which they shipped up north to Canada brick by brick for filming. I mean, because it's typically way more cost effective to film home there than it is in New York for real. You know, and even factoring in like the Power Rangers and Space crossover for I think this also tied together, especially given how later incarnations, and especially co-creator Peter Laird, understandably don't like to talk about this one at all. This last point, which encapsulates all the other ones I talked about here is this. I mean, it's not the first time I brought up this point, and or others mention it, but an adaptation need not capture every single letter of the material in my eyes, just the spirit. And I don't think it does that here. All the adaptation really needs to do is understand what made its source work, and I believe that is the reason why this incarnation has remained so infamous among the fan base, and why it's been effectively stricken from canon. And since then, a lot of elements were remixed later. Either Jenica fared better than Venus did as like a female turtle, and in many incarnations, I've appreciated how they made April something like an unofficial member of the team, being they leave from the streets, and in some cases, also knowing ninjutsu as well. So, I can definitely understand why I I personally was onto this. And all I'm saying is you're not required to put up with just any other adaptation that comes your way, Dan. If people collectively deserve better, then I believe people should also collectively demand better. If I don't always agree with others' takes, one thing I do appreciate about other fandoms is that if they feel dissatisfied with something and something is presented well, they'll let you know. I always appreciate that. It would be 5 years to the end of the show that we'll get another adaptation, which is a vast improvement. In fact, I can say that out of each one that's come out of Next Mutation, be the 03 show, the 2012 series especially enjoyed, as did Rise, and now, with the success of last year's Mutant Mayhem, we're going to be getting another one set in this continuity, so it'll be that much easier to put this disappointment behind me, and definitely going to be enjoying talking about that one streams tomorrow, so going to rewatch this movie again this evening, and I'll see you all again with my first impressions of Tales of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, dudes.